Hello and welcome back to my channel. Today I am kicking off my Backpacking for Beginners series where I'm going to go over a bunch of tips for getting you on your first backpacking trip. Or if you've already gone backpacking, to ramp up your game so that you can go backpacking more, go farther, and feel more confident in the backcountry. Today I'm going to go over 8 tips for how to pick the trail for your first backpacking trip. I remember when I started backpacking, I had so much anxiety and paralysis around getting out for the first time, and a lot of that stemmed around not knowing whether or not I was picking the right trail. So here are some tips that you can use to make sure that you have a successful first backpacking trip. My first tip is to stay local. This is super important and definitely one of the tips that made the biggest difference in my first backpacking trip. The key to this is to choose an area that you're already somewhat familiar with in terms of the trails and the roads. In an ideal situation, you want to be close enough to home that if anything does go wrong, you can just pack up and head home and sleep in your own bed. Not only does this give you a solid plan B if things don't go as expected, but you'll feel more comfortable backpacking knowing that you can always bail, totally fine, and just head home if you need to. My second tip for picking your first trail is to aim for a mileage below what you can comfortably hike in a day. And I'm talking round trip. So say you feel comfortable hiking 8 to 10 miles as a day hike. I would set that as your max mileage for your entire backpacking trip. So that means that on your day hiking out, theoretically you would hike 4 to 5 miles, and on your hike back in, you would hike another 4 to 5 miles back. This is important for 2 reasons. First of all, when you're carrying a backpack with a bunch of stuff in it, the miles are gonna feel much longer and much harder. We're pretty pooped, honestly. Like every time we start walking again, I'm like, I wanna take a break. So if you can hike 8 to 10 miles in a day with just a day pack, you're gonna have a much harder time hiking that with a backpack full of all your stuff. So expect that the miles will go slower and that you'll be much more tired with the same number of miles. And the second reason is just like the first point, if you do need to bail for whatever reason, say you forgot something important at home or the weather isn't working out for you, you want to make sure that you're able to hike back out to the trailhead the same day. And if you choose a trail that's too long and you end up really far into the backcountry, you won't have enough time or energy to get back to the trailhead before the sun goes down. My third tip is to choose a trail that is moderately to heavily trafficked. Don't go somewhere super remote for your first trip. Even though it might be tempting, it's super helpful to know that there's other people around in case you get injured or you're missing something. Say you forgot to bring a charger and your phone dies, knowing that there's other people around on the trail or at camp, you can borrow something from them if you need to. This also helps reduce the anxiety of feeling like you might get lost, which I know is a worry for a ton of people, and I still sometimes have that. But if you're on a popular trail with a lot of people and the trail is well worn, you won't have to worry about that. My fourth tip is a tried and true method for finding the perfect backpacking trail, and that is that it comes highly recommended. What I mean by this is instead of just doing your own research for which trail to do, ask around. More than likely you have a friend or someone in your network that already goes on backpacking trips that you can ask for a recommendation. That is actually how I found the trail for my first backpacking trip, which was incredible, a 10 out of 10. My fifth tip is to watch the elevation gain. This will really sneak up on you. If you're an avid hiker already, you know that it's more than the miles that counts towards how difficult a trail is. If it's 2 miles, it could be really easy, but if you have an elevation gain of 1,000 feet, it's probably gonna be pretty hard. So make sure you factor this in when you're picking a trail and go for something relatively flat if possible. Under a few hundred feet of elevation gain is a good first backpacking trip. I mean, to illustrate the point, 100 feet or so of elevation is around 1 floor in a building. So imagine carrying a backpack filled with 20, 30, 40 pounds of gear up all of these flights. So 4,000 feet of elevation on a hike might not sound like so much, but if you're climbing 40 sets of stairs with all this gear, it's really gonna add up fast. My sixth tip is related to the last one, and it's to skip the 14ers. Basically what I mean by this is to not aim for a peak that's gonna be at a very high elevation. You might have a trail that starts at a high elevation and ends at a high elevation, so you don't have a lot of elevation gain over the trail, but being at a high elevation, especially relative to what you're used to, is gonna be very difficult. Coming firsthand from someone who has always lived right about at sea level, anytime I go hiking or backpacking and there's elevation, say I start at 6,000 feet, that's pretty difficult for me. So if you're not used to that, the air is gonna be much thinner, it's harder to breathe, you're gonna have a really rough time. So start closer to sea level if possible, or at least close to where you normally live in terms of elevation, and skip the 14ers. My 7th tip for you is to check the water sources along the trail that you're going to be hiking. Water is one of the heaviest things that we have to carry as backpackers, so if you have water sources along your trail that you can fill up at, that saves you a ton of weight across your trip. Always remember to check if the water sources are seasonal or if they're all year round. If you have something like a lake or a large river or a large waterfall, it's probably safe to assume that it's running all year round. But if it's a smaller stream, a smaller waterfall, then just be sure to check recent reports to make sure that it's actually flowing at the time that you go. I also recommend marking these on your map so you know at which points you'll be able to fill up your water, and then you can use that as a gauge to decide how much water you need to carry at a time. For your first trip, I would err on the side of caution and carry a little more water than you think you'll need, because you will drink more than you think. I am definitely guilty of this, but know that you can fill up at points along the trail, so you don't need to carry your water for the entire trip on your back the entire time. And my final and 8th tip for you today is to choose a trail with an epic view, a waterfall, a lake, or something incredible at the end as a reward. For my first backpacking trip, I had the most incredible views. There were wildflowers and mountains, and there were lakes along the way. Not only does this boost your motivation along the trail, because trust me, it is hard, and there are going to be times that you're wondering what the heck you got yourself into. This still happens to me on almost every backpacking trip. We're dying. I think we're maybe like a mile in or something. It's definitely a struggle, and dude, these backpacks are so freaking heavy. Backpacking is definitely type 2 fun, but increasing the fun, the actual type 1 fun, by having an amazing view makes the experience all the more enjoyable. But either way, at the end of the day, I'm sure that by the time you make it back to the trailhead, you are going to be planning your next backpacking trip. Thank you so much for watching, and if you have any other questions about backpacking, please leave them in the comments below and I will get to you as soon as I can, and maybe I will address them in a future Backpacking for Beginners video. If you found this helpful at all, I am leaving links down below for my Patreon, which I just launched, and for my newsletter, which is launching next week, and I'm super excited. So be one of the first people to sign up for my newsletter and you'll receive the first issue of it next week. Lastly, if you want some more information about how to start backpacking or how to improve your trips, I'll leave a couple links, I think they're here, at the end of this video for apps that will improve your backpacking trips. And I highly recommend that you check that one out, and for a playlist of some trips to give you some inspiration. So I hope to see you here next time, and take care. Bye!